quorum?
We do because, well, at least we're getting one because Commissioner Townsend is supposed to be with us by phone.
Yeah, she's supposed to call in, but she hasn't yet.
All right, so at the moment, we're on hold, starting our meeting.
Hello.
Oh, there we go. She's there.
On.
And Brian, I never received a full agenda, so I have no idea, other than Star Bonds, what's on our agenda.
You got it. Oh, but you don't have your service.
No, I do have it.
It came like 3 minutes ago. Because I got it again. Because they sent you an electronic copy.
Okay, that doesn't really work.
I understand. Okay, trust me.
Not trying to be rude,
I
but
understand.
giving me something 3 minutes in advance and asking me to, if I got a vote. I know that we're not voting on Star Bonds, but I think there's
Actually,
probably others.
to the best of my knowledge, nothing on the EDF agenda requires a vote.
Oh, great.
It's all for information only and for continuing, shaping the discussion for a future vote.
All right, great.
My understanding is that on neighborhood and community development, both things will require a vote.
Never seen them.
Chris will fill you in when we get there.
Okay. Oh, it's either land bank or
Correct.
what was the other one?
They're both
They're
land
both
bank.
land bank.
Oh, then,
They're both land bank.
okey-doke.
All right, so Commissioner Townsend, you are with us?
Yes, I am.
Fantastic. Well, in that case, we'd like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Neighborhood and Community Development Standing Committee. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on any item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when that item is up for discussion. You'll have 5 minutes to make your comments, so please be recognized by myself, and then you'll make your comments from the podium here in the meeting room. For accurate recording and broadcasting purposes, we do ask that all present speak directly into a microphone. So our first order of business is called order, and roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters,
Here.
Murguia,
Here.
Townsend,
Here.
McKiernan.
Here. All right, so for members of the committee, except Commissioner Murguia, we did have an update. There were originally 2 items on our committee agenda, and I know I'm skipping ahead of the standing committee. Well, I'll tell you what, our first item of business is approval of standing committee minutes from our June 2nd, 2014 meeting.
I would move for approval.
Second?
There's a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the standing committee minutes from June 2nd, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. The minutes are approved as submitted. So now, on our committee agenda, there were originally 2 items, and we got an update for item number 2. So you got a blue sheet for item number 2, and Mr. Slaughter is going to take us through that blue sheet. But it was introduced on our original agenda, but we did receive an update. So item number 1 is a communication regarding land bank applications, and that is Mr. Slaughter.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Before you guys take action on this, I want to ask that one of the applications we pulled tonight, we've received another application for the exact address, so we will be doing a best and final and hopefully presenting that next month. And that is the application for 646 Oakland Avenue. The rest, if you have any questions on those, be happy to answer those.
So the rest of those are all up for consideration, and the Land Bank Advisory Board has reviewed and approved all the remaining recommendations. Any questions?
Since I haven't seen the list, Chris, would you just read down real quickly?
Absolutely.
Is it the list long?
No, there's 6 addresses.
Can you read those
Sure.
addresses real quick for me?
4833 McGurk Street, 4816 Sorter Drive, 723 South Valley Street, 4959 Elmwood Avenue, 3562 North 35th Street, and 2605 Calumet Avenue.
Thanks.
And these are all yard expansions, Commissioner, every one of them.
Thank you. Move for approval? We need you.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
Is this excluding 646 Oakland?
That is, it's excluding 646 Oakland.
I second that.
So we have a motion and a second to approve all of the land bank applications excluding 646 Oakland Avenue. Any further discussion? Hearing none, roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters.
Aye.
Murguia,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. That takes care of item number 1, and it moves us to item number 2, which is now on the blue sheet, or the update that we received. And this is a communication recommending that an area not be considered for release unless Land Bank Board of Trustees, that is the commission, approves the request from the Land Bank manager. So, Mr. Slaughter, if you could just lay this out for us and what you'd like from us.
Before I start, I don't believe on the blue sheet there was a map included. I did print some off, and they are in color that I'd like to pass out to give you a better
Absolutely, let's do
visual.
that.
Oh,
Thank you.
Now, actually, on my blue sheet, this map was included.
Yeah,
So for Commissioner Townsend, when you got the blue sheet, was there a map included that had Walker Avenue on the north, Sandusky Avenue on the south, 8th Street on the east, and 12th Street on the west?
Unfortunately, the only blue sheet that I saw was the one for the Economic Development Committee meeting to follow this one.
Okay.
So I don't have a blue sheet related to these particular items.
Well, Mr. Slaughter has given us a map that shows both land bank parcels currently in the land bank, and then shows parcels that are eligible for a tax sale in an area that is bounded by Walker Avenue on the north, by Sandusky Avenue on the south, then by 8th Street on the east side, and by 12th Street on the west side. So that has roughly State Avenue as a dividing line, with my District 2 south of State Avenue for a chunk, and I would assume primarily Terrence's district north of State Avenue for the remainder of it. District 4,
I
would
think
that
that's correct.
be accurate? Okay. So now if you can go ahead and set it up, Mr. Slaughter.
Thank you. What we're proposing is, we ran some data and some numbers, and it kind of goes back to a discussion we had a couple months ago about strategic assembly. And as you can see from the map, everything indicated in red is currently in our inventory, and then everything in green is eligible to be put into a tax sale. And there are some of those green shaded areas that will include improvements. We didn't have time to segment those out. But again, you know, within those boundaries, a large segment, you know, of that area possibly could end up in the land bank's possession. And if we think forward, you know, in a strategic way of increasing footprints in areas of our city, this being in the downtown area, you know, from the land bank's perspective, we feel there's huge advantages moving forward by having such a large footprint. We have run these numbers or this type of data in other areas of the county that we're considering looking at. But also the strength of a hold area, it gives me the ability to say to potential applicants that right now this property is hands off. We want to make sure that if something happens in the future, we're in a position that could positively affect anything that goes on, both in a commercial or a housing area. And, you know, we feel, or I feel, that having the board's approval of this type of an area just helps me out in dealing with potential applicants.
So, as I understand the recommendation or the proposal that you're bringing forward, it would be that any property that's currently in the land bank within these boundaries would simply need to be approved by the Board of Trustees, and that is the commission, before it's transferred out to someone who makes an application.
Correct.
And that as any of these green areas that are eligible for the tax sale, as any of them might be added through a tax sale, they would similarly be held and then only parceled out if the Board of Trustees then approves the transfer request brought forward by you.
Yeah, it's kind of a two-way. anything in the land bank possession, we would ask that the board approve before we sell. And then also, we're looking at this area to heavily go after tax delinquent property and to increase our inventory within these boundaries. I know we've also had conversations about trying to decrease that inventory, but that was more on a countywide discussion. This is a strategic area that we feel that if we can increase that land bank footprint, there would be huge advantages for not only the unified government, but the land bank as well.
So, Chris, I get your strategy, but that's usually a strategy implemented by developers, not by governments. So what developer, or are we not working with the developer to market this area?
We are currently not looking or working with the developer. This, again, I ran some data. These were some areas that came up that really had a heavy saturation of tax delinquent properties right in conjunction with heavily saturated land bank properties. And we just figured if we strategically go after them and also make it kind of known throughout the community that this is kind of a hands-off area, you know, hopefully there could be some advantages to that.
Bringing your very own.
Okay, thanks, Brian. Okay, the other thing I want to make sure of is because, you know, I love these maps. I love to show them, as you know, I've showed them all across the county. So I would hope that whoever is viewing this on television right now, there is a way for our camera people to zoom in on this map, or they have a copy that they can show the public. And if they don't now, that between now and posting that to our YouTube website where people can review, because what I find astonishing, I can't resist the opportunity to turn it over. Only about 25% of the property within this northern area is paying taxes. Am I interpreting that right?
That's probably a very fair assessment.
So just, I'm gonna say it one more time because I'm not sure. it's kind of unbelievable. So in this northern section, only 25% of if there are people living there, and I assume there are, only 25% of them are paying their taxes. The rest are not. Anything with any kind of shading, people are not paying taxes.
There's no tax revenue being generated out of those areas, those colors.
More than 25%.
And we plow these streets, and we
Yes.
service these sewers?
To my understanding, yes.
Okay, just checking.
A huge problem, which I would say we're going to devote a lot of discussion time to over the coming year and look at actually some strategies. And we've been working on several strategies to try to unpaint those painted areas, because we've had discussions before about the need to get that done so that we have enough revenue to actually provide the services that our citizens want and need in their city.
Sure.
I'd move for approval.
Second?
So it's been motioned and seconded that we, oh, I'm sorry, I missed it entirely. So we do have someone who'd like to talk, and what we need to do, first of all,
I'll get it.
yeah, we need to get a microphone clipped in right there so that you can be heard. If we can take that one. No, ma'am, they can't hear you on television. So we need to get a microphone over there for you.
All right, okay.
All right.
Mary Ann Plunder, and I live at 1236 Grandview Boulevard. I would like to be added to the list for waterway. I'm not part of St. Peter's, but we do have a waterway group that has been completely left out a lot of times. And I would like to add my name to that so I could receive the information. As Joe is ill, who is the president of Waterway Neighborhood Group. So my post office box is 171535, and it's Kansas City, Kansas, 66117.
So you have that, Mr. Slaughter?
And just for clarification, can you elaborate on the type of information you're not receiving?
I haven't received any of it, and maybe it's been going to Joe Davis, but Joe Davis is the president of Waterway. Okay. Joe is the president of Waterway Neighborhood Group, and what they have did is lump both of them together. So I am saying that I have not received it. So please send it to me because she is ill. If you are sending it to her. And if not, if you just send it to St. Peter's, then you have excluded Waterway altogether.
We'll make sure that any information that does get sent out to the neighborhood groups, and it is infrequent, but any information that gets sent out will be sent out to all groups. We'll absolutely make sure of that.
Commissioner McKiernan, I have a question too, if the speaker has completed or commented.
She has.
Okay. The upgrowth of this proposal, the outgrowth of this, is that if there is property within any of those shaded areas, I'm seeing it on the screen, if someone wants to purchase that property, they have to come through the board for it, correct? That's the bottom line with this?
Correct.
Yes, Commissioner, any of those type of applications and requests that we feel would need to move forward, we will bring those to the board's attention for consideration. And it would probably parallel just the normal process, but again, your action tonight and hopefully on the 28th just gives me a little bit more added direction and something to back me up on this when dealing with potential applicants.
Okay.
We-
Have
we-
any of the neighborhood groups voiced any concern about this additional requirement?
No, they have not.
Okay. Thank you.
So there's been a motion and a second to approve the request from Mr. Slaughter that land in this area not be considered for sale or release unless it's come through the Land Bank Board of Trustees. Any further discussion?
Okay, just real quick, for a time frame or for indefinitely?
Mr. Slaughter?
You know, I didn't consider that. That's probably something we could entertain and then have it be a review at the end of that time frame. I would be open to any suggestions.
I think there needs to be a time frame, because then somebody will forget about it, is my concern. Someone will forget about it, is my concern, and 2 years, somebody will say, why aren't we moving any of that land bank property in this part of the city? And someone will say, well, we put a hold on it. So can we do a year, and then if we need longer, just come back and get us to move it for another year?
And I'll do my best not to forget about that. But yeah, I think that's only reasonable.
I was referring more to the politicians.
So I guess I'll amend my motion to include a time period of 1 year.
Second.
All right, so we have an amendment to the original motion to approve Mr. Slaughter's request with a time frame of 1 year before review of the policy again. Any further discussion?
One question.
Yes, ma'am.
How many homes or applications, let's say within the last year, would this have impacted?
Commissioner, well, let me ask for clarification. How many land bank properties are probably in this area, or how many applications have I received in these areas?
Yes, how many applications in these areas have been received within the last year?
Probably less than 20.
Okay, thank you.
All right, we'll have a roll call, please.
Roll call, Walters,
Aye.
Murguia,
Aye.
Townsend,
Aye.
McKiernan.
Aye. So we will revisit this in 1 year's time, and until that time, any request will come to the Board of Trustees. Very good. That takes us to our final item on tonight's agenda, and that really is just going back to goals and objectives, and all I'm going to do is just set something up and give a little bit of homework to the commissioners here on the committee. So we are going to come into another strategic planning session, probably in late October or early November. And the mayor would like us to revisit the 9 commission goals that we set up a couple of years ago and revisit them in consideration of what does it really look like to us when we achieve these goals? How can we measure achievement of these goals? And how can we direct staff in strategies and in activities that would enhance achievement of these goals? So I'll just point out that we have housing is one of the broad goals for this particular committee, and the goal reads, develop policies and programs that grow neighborhoods to their maximum potential, make property owners accountable for their property, and foster a diverse housing stock. And so I just ask you to think about, what does it mean for us to grow neighborhoods to their maximum potential? Does that mean density of structures? Does it mean medium structure value? Does it mean the composition of the neighbors within that neighborhood? Does it mean the sales volume of the businesses? What does it mean to grow neighborhoods to their maximum potential, which then leads to, and how can we measure that eventual outcome? Make property owners accountable for their property. A lot of this falls under the heading of code enforcement. So what does it mean when we make property owners accountable for their property? Does the amount of blight change? If so, how do we define blight? Do the number of properties with code violations decrease? Does the amount of time that any given property has an open code case decrease? So what does it look like, and how can we actually measure, make property owners accountable for their property?
So Commissioner McKiernan, I'm flattered that the mayor and everyone thinks that, I'll just speak for myself, that I'm qualified to do that. But in my opinion, this is a very specific science to determining outcomes and determining measures and benchmarks and standards and those kind of things. I mean, some people go to school forever to be what I would refer to as a researcher, to come up with those benchmarks and standards. I love it that they're asking our advice, but I really think to really come up with something that's credible and workable and really measurable would be to enlist assistance from maybe a research team. I know that it's no secret I run a not-for-profit organization, and we receive quite a bit of federal funding as well as local philanthropic dollars. And our funders would never fund us without credible benchmarks and standards. And how I do that is I partner with KU, and I have 2 full-time researchers that are both have their doctorate in research that help me decide what those benchmarks and standards are. And they're very complex, much more so than I ever thought before I got in that line of work. So I think it would not be a reasonable expectation to think we could come up with specific benchmarks and standards. What I think we could do is talk through with a researcher who does that for a living what our vision is, and they can come up with those benchmarks and standards.
That's exactly what we're going to do. So what I'm asking the commission to do is, let's recast our vision. Where we are today, we created these 2 years ago. Based on what's happened in the last 2 years, where are we today? What is our vision for these areas?
Okay.
We are going to need to incorporate not only some people with research background, we'll also need to incorporate our staff into these discussions as well, because the staff can give us an idea about how about how well they could gather data to support some of the metrics that we might create. We might create a metric for which we currently don't collect data. So they might need to then start collecting that data, and that might drive then some changes in how we report, how we store data, how we organize it. So really what I'm just asking is that in advance of next month's meeting, which then is in advance of our strategic planning session, that we look under the area of housing, what's our current vision? And broadly, what does it mean to us if we accomplish that vision? Under multimodal transportation, which was assigned because I guess it has a neighborhood component to it, it says create a transportation system that moves people to where they want to go, including work, services, and amenities. What's our vision for that? And is this still does that goal still fit our current vision? Do we still want to include it as one of our goals? Do we want to modify it? Do we think we can have an impact on it? and continue the discussion.
So, I guess I would say that, I think what we have here, you know, growing neighborhoods to our maximum potential and making property owners accountable for their property, is sort of the vision in my mind. So am I missing something? Do you have a more specific idea? Could you give me an example?
Well, for example, under create a transportation system.
Okay.
So is that a bus system that has more linear miles of route? Is it a bus system that has more buses on it that run more frequently? Is it a light rail system? Is it a heavy rail system?
But doesn't that depend strongly upon the area of the city that we're referring to?
Absolutely it does, which is why we want to start having and further defining this. It is so currently so broad in its current application of one sentence there that it is not a one-size-fits-all. It absolutely has to be subdivided based on, in my opinion, based on area of the city, based on what our vision is, and that then drives discussions about infrastructure. It drives discussions about funding. It drives discussions about potential partners.
So are you asking for our vision for our districts? No, because not everybody is represented here.
Well, but it would be interesting to think about goals per district.
It would be, absolutely. And yes, not everybody is here yet. But if we can begin the discussion and start shaping, or at least come up with some questions that we think everybody should answer for their district, then we can be that much further ahead when we come to our strategic planning session in late October, early November, and be more productive in that session and actually get some things hopefully nailed down that day.
Okay, so vision within our district, that's very easy for me. It's harder for me if you're gonna ask me to speak to that in Piper, for example, since I
Right.
don't live out there.
But since your district adjoins mine, then eventually there's going to be spillover, and you and I will have to talk about, well, how your vision might then, if we're talking about the multimodal transportation, a bike path that now is going to span a district line, a bus route that's going to span a district line, and that'll eventually drive us to start thinking bigger than our district, but I think the district's a great place to start.
Okay, I can do that.
All right.
That's helpful. It's great, thanks.
And then finally, and again, I think per district would be great, but the other thing that's been assigned to this committee is healthy communities / recreation. So what's it mean when we achieve our goal of encouraging lifestyle? That's very broad, and we have not yet done a good job of focusing that very broad goal. Encouraging lifestyle through programs, services, and facilities. What kind of programs? What services? What facilities might help drive healthy lifestyle or recreation opportunities?
So you want us to write this down and then take it to who? Give it to who?
And what I'll do is I'll volunteer to collect them all, collate them all, bring them back to this group, then redistribute them to this group at our next meeting, at which point we can decide, are we making any progress, any headway here? Is this something we can then take to the rest of the commission to drive some preparation prior to our big strategic planning meeting?
Okay, all right, got it.
All right? Well, that's our homework. So if you can get your big chief tablet out.
So when are you looking for?
In the best of all possible worlds, if I could have that feedback from the four of us, myself and the other three, 2 weeks from today, that'll give me time to collate it and bring it back for our next meeting.
Okay, all right.
Thank you.
Perfect. It's a big assignment.
It is a big
Chairman
assignment.
McKiernan. That's a lot of work.
It is a lot of work, but at some point, and you and I have had this discussion before, at some point, we need to break these down and make them a little more granular so that we can actually carve out an achievable chunk
Yeah,
and demonstrate that we've gotten there and know exactly what resources we need to put toward it to achieve that. That's the only way we're going to be able to achieve these broad goals, is by chipping away and picking off manageable chunks.
Sure.
So I'd like us to start chunking it, as it were, in preparation for the strategic planning meeting in November.
okay.
If there is no other discussion, that is the end of the items that are up for consideration for this committee. This meeting is adjourned. Our next meeting was to start at 5:30. Is that correct, Mr. Criswell? I think we were set for 5:30. Mr. Alvey has informed me that he is running late. However, with Commissioner Townsend, we do have a quorum here, so we can go ahead and begin our Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee. Oops, not that one. So Commissioner Townsend, we're going to go ahead and shift our gears now into our next committee.
All right.
And I will just make the statement that we would like to welcome everyone to this meeting of the Economic Development and Finance Standing Committee. Public comment is welcome. Anyone wishing to speak on an item on the Standing Committee agenda may do so when that item is up for discussion. You'll have 5 minutes to make your comments. Please get my attention so that I can recognize you. You'll then go to the podium to make your comments. For accurate recording and broadcasting purposes, we ask that everyone present please speak directly into a microphone. Roll call, please.
Roll call, Alvey. Walters.
Here.
Murgia.
Here.
Townsend.
Here.
McCarron.
Here. Our first item of business is approval of the Standing Committee minutes from our June 2nd, 2014 meeting. I would entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second?
There's been a motion and a second to approve the minutes of June 2nd, 2014. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Those minutes have been approved as submitted. We have 4 items on our committee agenda tonight. All of them are for information and to generate some discussion, to shape some further work. I just will make 2 clarifications. We did receive an agenda update that contained supporting materials for what was item number 4, the Vacation Village Star Bond Redevelopment District. So everyone should have a blue sheet that has the related information for that. And then the second thing is, Mr. Brakovich, who's presenting item number 4, asked if there was no objection if he could move that item in front of item number 3. So make it the 3rd item for consideration on our agenda tonight. Some of the people who are here with him and will present with him have another meeting this evening and want to build in enough time to make it from one meeting to the other. So are there any objections to moving item number 4 up so that it becomes item number 3?
Or just want to do it first?
We'll go ahead and make it item number 3. So
Okay.
we'll move that up to item number 3. Item number 1 is now a report, our quarterly investment report, and Mr. Levin and Mr. Lindsay are here.
Thank you, Commissioners, and we're pleased to retain our item number 1 status. This is our quarterly investment report and budget revision report for the 2nd quarter of 2014. Again, it's for information only. I'll review the investment portion of the report, and Mr. Lindsay will speak to the budget revisions. I believe you have the investment report in your packet. We're essentially following similar trends. Our total investments at the end of the quarter were slightly under $157 million. Total interest posted so far as of the end of the 2nd quarter was slightly under $230,000, and our average rate of interest on our investments 0.56%. I'll note that we had, during the 2nd quarter, we offered local banks the opportunity to invest $95,000 in accordance with our investment policy. 3 banks chose to participate on taking that investment, and those individual investments are listed. One thing we've tried to do is ladder our investments. So if you look at the detail on our investments, you'll see they range from 2014, and this is maturity date, through May of 2018. And that allows us to, although interest rates remain low, the we garner a slightly higher interest rate on our 3- and 4-year investments. If there's not any questions on the investment side of the report, I'll turn it over to.
I just do have one question, and just a curious question. What's been the trend, if any, in our minuscule interest rate over, let's say, the last year? Has it been flat or moving in either direction?
It's generally been pretty constant at the actually, since the beginning of the year, short-term interest rates have dropped. They're aligned with the 10-year Treasury rate, and at the beginning of the year, the 10-year Treasury was near 3%, and it's dropped to about 2.5%, and that's affected. The short-term interest rates are very low. We're actually pleased when on our overnight investments, that our contract with UMB at least guarantees a floor of 0.25%. But if we were, if we didn't have that guarantee, we would be at a lower rate.
It's kind of depressing, just have to say. Okay, thank you. Go ahead and move on.
The budget revision report we have in front of you is that for the second quarter of 2014, there were 8 transactions that totaled $648,000. 4 of those transactions were bought before the commission within the second quarter. Are there any questions about any of the ones in particular? Or?
So the 4 that came before us then would have been?
They're the ones that over $50,000.
Yeah.
The one for the 2016 Republican National Convention.
Right.
The YMCA.
Correct.
Also maintenance to the T-Bones Ballpark, and then also the Upper Connor Creek transaction.
Any questions or discussion on these items?
No.
We thank you for the report. And does that conclude item number 1?
Yes, it does.
All right. Mr. Alvey, good to see you. That then takes us to item number 2 on the committee agenda, which is a communication regarding our fund balance policy.
Commissioners, as you may remember, in June of this year, the commission approved our annual 2013 CAFR, or our financial statements. And based on those financial statements, we've prepared, and this is the 3rd year we've done it, is show how our fund balance compares to what our actual fund balance is compared to our stated goal, or our fund balance policy. I'll point, you should have before you a table that shows fund balance actual to policy 2011 to 2013. I'm going to point out just a few things in that table. We have it color coded, and so if you look at percentages where we have blue, that indicates that we are above our goal. Black indicates we are within our range of our goal, and then red would be below our goal. So one of the key ones we look at certainly is our general fund balance, and on a budgetary basis, you see in red, and I'm going to look at where it's the line that says subtotal. We ended the year 2013 with a fund balance of 3.2%. That was below the previous year of 5.6% and slightly above the 2011 figure. And that's a percent of fund balance as a percent of expenditures. On our special revenue funds, we trended very well, and in most instances we were above our goal. We met our goal or were above it. Down at the bottom, you see reference to our gaps basis, and that's the fund goals viewed on a GAAP basis, I'll say our results are different, and they're higher. For the general fund, at the end of 2012, our fund balance was 11.5%, and it fell below 10% to the 8% level. And you might remember in our recent budget discussions, you know, this is really the area that's viewed most closely by credit agencies, and they're looking for that 10% fund balance. So we fell below that in 2013. I'll just point out some of the basic differences between a GAAP basis and budget basis. It's really how some of the differences include how encumbrances are treated, when revenues are recorded or expenditures, and how capital assets are. So over time, what we've seen is on a GAAP basis, our fund balance is at a higher level than a budgetary basis. But for budget performance or for our day-to-day activity, we're required to adhere to a budget basis accounting. Any questions?
Any questions, any discussion about the fund balance report?
No action, again, is required.
You know, I'll just reiterate a discussion we had extensively just a week ago and 2 weeks ago, is that we really need to work over the coming year to do whatever we can to move our fund balance, because I noticed that the three funds that are in red here are the three that, well, two of the three that have the most money expended through them, the city general fund and the county general fund. And so we really do need to work really hard over the coming year to get our fund balances up in both of those funds so that we hedge against any negative change in our bond rating. Thank you, Mr. Levin. Thank you, Mr. Lindsay. So, Mr. Brakovich, I'm not sure you heard, but we did go ahead and move item number 4 up to item number 3. So at this point, I'm going to turn this over to George Brakovich, who's going to give us a presentation regarding the Vacation Village Star Bonds Redevelopment District.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. George Brakovich with Economic Development. And again, I do appreciate you considering moving this item forward. I'd like to quickly introduce Todd LaSallo with Stinson Leonard Street. Todd is representing the UG on the negotiations of the development agreement, and he's responsible for all the good ideas within this tonight. What we wanted to do tonight is have staff come up and kind of present both the structure of the amended TIF or amended STAR district, and kind of present what the project plans are, but slightly gloss over the details of those project plans, because we have both development groups here tonight. There's a group representing the Schlitterbahn team, as well as a group representing the soccer team. And so what we thought from a staff perspective, if we could outline the changes to the district and the project plan, and talk about some of the key deal points with the Schlitterbahn, it could possibly serve as a framework when you're hearing the details from the developers in terms of what the request might be.
If I could just, could we go ahead and put that in presentation mode just so we can run that full
I'm
screen?
trying to see where that is.
It's down at the bottom right-hand side near where it says 103%, right?
Right here.
Left of there, right there.
There we go.
That one.
Thank you. Okay, so what are we here for tonight? The executive summary for the deal points. Again, this is informational only. And part of why it's informational only is some of the previous action that has occurred on this item. To begin with, in July, we went to Planning Commission to get a master plan conformance finding on the project plans for project areas within this district. You'll see later that's project areas 1, 2, and 4. And then actually the full commission on July 24th considered resolutions that actually set a public hearing date to formally hear these proposals for August 28th. So our commitment to the standing committee was to try to come in advance of that public hearing date to kind of set the parameters or share the deal points that we've negotiated to. So I'll start with this slide. The original Vacation Village Star District, this was considered and created in 2005 Subsequently, there was a project plan approved for this in 2007, which kind of started that 20-year calendar for this area. You can see the parameters parallel on the north, State Avenue on the south, 435 on the west, and 94th Street on the east. And as it was originally created, it was one large contiguous district and did not have separate project areas. So, which brings us to today and the proposed amended STAR district and what it looks like. So you kind of still see, and I'm sorry that the streets aren't highlighted, but again, it's parallel on the north, State Avenue on the south, 435 and 94th Street. So the original area is still contained, and you can see we've added a few areas, as well as the colored shaded areas represent different project areas. Project Area 1 would be the existing water park extended over to 94th Street. Project Area 2 is kind of the northwest quadrant of the original area, as well as 98th Street. Area 3 is, we'll kind of refer to that as the front 50 acres. Area 4 is the purple area, which represents the U.S. Soccer, and you'll see that it has an overlay into the Village West area, as well as new property on the east side of North 94th Street. And one thing to note here is this does not contemplate anything with the existing Village West district. We still plan to retire those STAR bonds in fashion, and it doesn't represent any access to the existing base sales that are captured within that area. And then Area 5 would be a future water park expansion. Like I said, the project teams are here, and they'll really delve into what these project areas might contain. But as we discuss some of the key deal points, I think you'll see that some of those will be highlighted anyway. So for this new project area, we're talking about a request for $90 million in net bond proceeds from STAR bonds. Again, that represents financing for project areas 1 and 2. So again, area 1 is the existing water park, and area 2 is the northwest quadrant, which is an auto mall and a hotel and some restaurant pad sites and a C-store. From that cap of $90 million, there's $5.4 million made available to the UG as a repayment for the improvements that were made to 98th Street. In addition to that $5.4 million, there's also money made available for a new traffic signal at 98th and State and the Marshall Creek sewer interceptor that has already been installed. You might recall in 2013 we actually created a CID at the water park, and part of that CID said the first revenues went to repay the UG for the traffic signal and that lift station. This deal contemplates getting repaid for that at the bond issuance, and then we'll make some changes to the CID. But part of the proceeds as well include a $25 million holdback provision. So that holdback has some performance provisions attached to the release of those funds back to the developer. So initially, there could be access for the developer to $15 million of that holdback if they do two things. One, execute ground lease showing that they've provided free ground to On Goal for the U.S. Soccer project. And then secondly, clean up and rough grade and seed that front 50 acres. So that was the project area 3, or the green shaded area in the new map. Then access to the remaining $10 million holdback is conditioned on one of two scenarios. One, that the UG has fully executed an unconditional development agreement with U.S. Soccer for their project, or that the developer has commenced the project for Area 3, which is described as 400,000 square feet of new retail.
Mr. Rakovich?
Yes.
Because there's a lot of information here, is it okay if questions come up as we're going through it?
Sure.
That we can just address those
Absolutely.
as we go through?
Yep.
Mr. Albee?
George, the question I would have is, obviously, the financing is meant to pay for the development costs, those that would be incurred by the unified government, the capital infrastructure costs. Does this include any funds set aside for electrical and/or water supply upgrades?
I know that there are infrastructure improvements within the project budget. These numbers simply represent specific repayment of UG debt on it. But, and I'm sure the developer can go through that. I did not bring that detailed budget with me, but I know each of the project areas had a infrastructure component attached to it.
Because my concern is that when the Board of Public Utilities attempts to budget, set aside money for new projects that come along, development projects, certainly eager to do that because that helps everybody, especially the city and the BPU. But it's more than just the traffic signals, it's the water supply, it's the electrical supply, perhaps it's the new substation, I don't know all that it might require. But one of the issues we have raised with Mayor Holland, and I think Commissioner McKiernan was on the meeting, in the joint meeting between BPU President and Vice President and the at-large commissioners and Mr. McKiernan in his stead, would take into account expenditures that the BPU would have to make for its capital cost. Otherwise, it has happened in the past where the BPU gets caught off guard, is not aware of this, and then has to scramble for the funds. So these are the kinds of things that really would require some coordination with the BPU on that matter. And I don't know if, Brian, if you had any more insight on that. I'm not part of those meetings at this time, or if even Jody might have some.
We can go back and verify that that coordination is taking place. I can tell you that I've sat in on some of our own public works initial review and planning staff review, and I know that those issues have come up.
Okay.
And again, perhaps the developer's attorney can address that. I'm sure they've got a lot of feedback from those planning sessions. Okay, and I do apologize. I know this is a lot of material, and I'm probably flying through it. But again, it's just, I'm hoping this can serve as a framework for when the development teams come up and really kind of delve into more of the details. So beyond the financing pieces of it, giving you maybe a little bit of insight into other parts of the deal, the Auto Mall, again, is considered for that northwest quadrant of the original area. And there's commitments there for at least 4 of the 7 dealerships that are proposed. 2 of those were former Wyandotte County dealerships. Now, although both of those point of sales were in the marketplace, and really the way the Star Bond statute reads is any existing businesses within the district, those base sales wouldn't be calculated towards the new revenue stream. We were able to negotiate with the developer on this that although these businesses were outside of the district, they were existing sales within the county, and so there, between the 2 dealerships, there represents a base sales value of $15.5 million. That was a negotiated piece into their revenue projections. The STAR calendar, I talked about that a little bit earlier, very similar to TIF, where you establish a district, and then as your project plan is approved, you get a 20-year calendar. Project Area 1, where the water park is, will assume the balance of that existing calendar from the plan that was approved in 2007. So those revenues will be collected through 2027. However, Project Area 2, if approved, when it's considered on August 28th, those revenues would be collected through 2034. And then subsequently, as the additional project area plans are approved, they would be subject to their own 20-year calendars. Additional developer improvements. We've got, there's a temporary intersection on State Avenue that serves the current Schlitterbahn Water Park entrance on the north end and on the south end. It services the St. Patrick's Church, as well as there's some medical offices. The agreement here would be that the developer would address those temporary situations and make long-term improvements as were previously submitted when the Schlitterbahn proposal first came through. That includes sidewalks and streetlights. Additionally, although a portion of 98th Street has been improved, the original plans called for an S-curve, kind of as it transitions between the south end of the development and the north end. If you can picture where it crosses France Family Drive, it calls for an S-curve there. And under the current agreement, the developer would be responsible for that additional improvement. A Couple of escrow accounts set up here. One would be for a year's worth of property tax payments, and the second would be for the maintenance of the 50 acres. Again, the previous slide called out, or earlier, one of the earlier slides called out that the developer would rough grade and seed that 50 acres. There would be an escrow account just to ensure that that's properly maintained. I talked a little bit about the CID earlier, as it was established to repay the UG. Now, if the UG gets repayment off that initial issuance, the CID would stay on a pay-as-you-go basis, but it would go to the developer solely. Again, Project Area 3, that front 50, under this agreement, there's a contemplated 5-year time frame for the developers team to get that project underway. If it doesn't happen after a 5-year period, the UG would have an option on that property. Prevailing wage and LMW participation goals, you guys have heard from us a lot about the changes to prevailing wage. However, the developer has agreed to stay committed for any of the project that they're constructing. They will continue to pay the prevailing wage component, and then we've got LMW goals on the construction and professional services, and contemplated on the operations piece of this project. And then donations. So the original development agreement called for a stair-step donation from the developer back to the community. Looking at what the value of that is, it represents about $750,000 that has not been paid to date. The agreement from the developer is under this scenario with the new bond issuance, the $750,000 would be paid as a lump sum, and then we kind of start over on the calendar. So as those payments increase over time, the starting payment is actually $100,000. So they make the $750,000 lump sum payment now. The following year, they would go back to starting at the $100,000 payment and then go from there. In talking to Lou earlier, and he's got some more details on this, just wanted to highlight what the request is then from the UG's revenue pledge on this. So in terms of revenue collected for the project, it would represents 1% of city sales tax and the UG share of the county sales tax. However, the UG would retain any new property tax that is collected from the new structures associated with it. And like I said, I'm sure Lou's still here. He's got some hard numbers that really tell the story of what each one of those might mean. And then I thought I'd go back to kind of the proposed map. And so if there's no further questions for me, I'd like to introduce probably the Schlitterbahn development team first, have them come up and maybe go through what they envision on each one of these project areas, or at least the area 1 and 2 that we're here to consider tonight. And then, like I said, I know soccer has a group here as well, and they can talk about the plan for area 4. Yes.
Can you go back one?
Sure.
I just wanted to add one additional part of the pledge would be transient guest tax revenue, and so I think the developer is going to mention that there would be a hotel as part of the project, and that would be part of the revenue stream captured by the first and allocated for Starbond debt service.
Okay. We just ask, when you're sharing the microphone, kind of slide it toward whoever is talking, and we'll be in great shape. Thank you.
Commissioner McKiernan, Kurt Peterson with the Polsinelli Law Firm. Pleased to be here tonight representing SVV1, the developer and landowner. Also with me is Richard Napper, representing EPR Properties, our lender. And though the lawyer's always tempted to launch right into all the details and everything, Mr. Brakovich, I think, did a very good job of hitting most all the salient points. And while we can launch, maybe we would turn it back to you to see if there are any particular areas you'd like us to hone in on here on the site plan or any other issues, and we could answer those questions.
Well, I had a question about the charitable contributions. I know it's early, but is that something the commission sets criteria for, or do you all bring back to them recommendations on how that money is allocated, or yet to be determined?
I think it's yet to be determined. The documents, the original documents and the contemplated new documents will say that those donations are really for foundations or other nonprofits or charitable opportunities. It is not contemplated that the developer decides how that money gets allocated. I think it'll ultimately wind up being a UG decision.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Murguia.
It's a bittersweet piece of the development agreement. As a member of the charitable giving committee, it's been a challenge. So I've talked about this tonight already. I did not get this agenda until 3 minutes prior to this meeting. So could you talk a little bit more about what Gordon is referring to as far as charitable giving piece of this?
Sure.
Thank you.
So the original development agreement had a concept in it where every year the developer was to make a charitable donation to really a cause that was not determined by the development agreement, but it says foundations or other nonprofit opportunities. That never happened, and it was sort of a graduated scale, Commissioner. It started at $100,000 a year, and over a 6 or 7 year period, it got up to as much as $250,000 a year. Those donations, and there's history about the project and so forth, but those donations were never made. So as Mr. Brakovich says, the new deal is that when we go and do the bond issue, all of that $750,000 that's in arrears, that's not been paid, that will be paid at the time we do that bond issue and close. So there will be a lump sum of $750,000 to be allocated to foundations or charitable purposes that the UG will get to determine. Going forward, after this bond closing, as George said, we're going to start this schedule again, but they will make a $100,000 payment the year after and then graduate up to where it's a $250,000 payment every year made by the developer.
So just as an FYI, in the future, it's more for our staff than for you or the developer. In the future, I would appreciate language. I love it that you're looking out for the charitable world, but I'd appreciate more specific language on how that money will be managed from a UG perspective in the future with agreements. Mostly because we have a charitable fund right now. And I can only speak for myself when I say I would like to see all that money go into one charitable fund pot and have one process. The last thing we need is more committees and more funds to manage and more people involved. It is confusing. So my 2 cents on that specific piece would be that it go into the money with the money we receive from the casino.
Okay.
Any other discussion or any other questions for these gentlemen on what's been presented so far?
But just in general, this follows the same format as the original Star Bond project area of the Legends and then a vacation village. That's really no different. It's different in structure.
Not sure I understand. It is different. So the original vacation village district was separate of Village West. And so this is an amended version of that, just the vacation village district. And so some of the things that were originally called for in that project plan and in that development agreement did not materialize. Although, and I probably should have prefaced this with, the developer has made significant improvements here. And looking at the budgets that they have submitted, they've spent in excess of $220 million to acquire this property, get the water park up and going. And we realize that the recession, the economy, that all played a big part in that original plan not materializing. And so we've taken a position with them where we're trying to negotiate a fair deal for them, but still get a lot of the community and components that were originally called for, ensure that those are met as well.
I'm sorry, I should have been more specific.
Sure.
In terms of the financial structure, it's pretty much similar. You're just trying to accommodate the fact that they've not been able to progress on Schlitterbahn the way they envisioned before the recession and trying to keep the development moving, but now we have some other opportunities, and these are great opportunities.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
Structurally,
Yeah.
Mr. Alvey, it is
Yeah.
the same vehicle, it's star bonds, the way we've
Right.
used them before. But I think what you said is well stated, you know, and George points out, this developer has put over $220 million into the project. We've never issued bonds for this project, so it was all private money. This is really for the first time an opportunity to issue star bonds and for them to begin the public part of the public-private partnership, and these are the opportunities that would result from that.
Thank you.
And as it relates to our current star bonds, because I know this is an item that has some people confused, the current star bonds that we will retire in a couple of years, want to make sure that we're clear that the increment that we have captured up to this point, the rise in sales tax that has been paying off those bonds, will now come to the UG and continue to come to the UG without decrementing or going back down, that this will all be on top of, above and beyond that level. So I don't want anybody to think, oh, they're not going to retire those star bonds after all, because in fact, those original ones will be retired, and we will realize that revenue. Is that correct?
Yes, it's well stated.
So that vehicle was a good vehicle for the development on the west side of 435. Now we're going to just use that vehicle for additional development on the east side of 435. Any other questions or discussion?
Just because I'm curious, what's a C-store?
Like a convenience store or gas station.
In the Starbond district?
Yes.
Okay.
It's one of the pads that the developer has proposed.
Commissioner Merguier, I can't help it. With the look on your face, maybe a little extra explanation on that. Both from, there's signals given. A high-quality C-store in this location, both from, we'll let the soccer folks speak for themselves and perhaps what their patrons may or may not want in staying in the hotel across the street and things like that. But from our perspective, it's just something that with the auto plaza, both with the dealers on the north side and then with the entire auto plaza here, as long as it's high quality, we felt like pretty hand in glove. But
So do
again,
you
we'll
know
let
what it
soccer speak
is? Is it a quick trip or you can't tell me, or just calling it a generic?
we have had a lot of discussions, but because we don't have a deal with a particular user yet, we're not in the position yet to announce, but
I
we hope
understand
so
that.
soon.
I was just curious if you knew, and,
Hopefully soon.
okay.
Could you speak, are there any proposals on hand for areas east of 94th Street in that purple area?
Yeah, I think the purple area represents the U.S. soccer component, so.
No, on the east side of 94th?
Yeah, right here, yes, yeah.
Oh, that's
So-
also the soccer?
Yes,
Oh, I would
it
not-
serves as a soccer component, so.
Okay.
This represents
It's all part of it.
about a 40-acre tract of ground that the Schlitterbahn development will enter into lease agreement with U.S. Soccer. So this is their outdoor fields in the, I guess, covered field or indoor stadium associated with that. This would represent additional outdoor fields, possibly tournament fields,
I see. Okay.
component of the soccer piece. Yeah.
I was out of town when you made the announcement, so. You timed it well.
Let's keep Mr. Alvey in the dark.
Yeah.
Not hard.
It is.
Great.
It's a big piece of property, and it introduces another 125 acres approximately into the district. But there are plans for that.
It appears there's no other questions or discussion. We thank you very much for the presentation, or at least this piece of it.
Sure.
And we have additional, correct?
Yeah,
All
the U.S. soccer team is here as well, and so I don't know if you have any questions for them, or is it what the material we covered here tonight, is that sufficient?
It would look like we have all of our questions and discussion taken care of. Thank you.
Great. All right. Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
They're gonna miss the LIHTC discussion. They're gonna miss the LIHTC discussion. I'm sure they're disappointed.
Right. We can record it for them.
Yeah, there you go. All right, so now what was item number 3 is item number 4. And this is just a continuation of a discussion that we've been having off and on throughout the year as we look to refine our internal process for approving or recommending projects that use low-income housing tax credits as a part of their funding stream.
Thank you.
And does this just duplicate what was in our packets? It's new.
There we go. Thanks.
Okay. So at the last time we discussed this, which was last month or the month before, I don't remember. Anyway, the last time we discussed this, we asked Mr. Brockman and Mr. Brakovich to take back some of our discussion, take back some of our comments, and see if they could suggest ways to rework our criteria and our process so that we have an improved process for approving projects that use low-income housing tax credits as part of their funding. I'll let you gentlemen take it.
Good evening, Commissioners. Thank you. And you're correct. We were looking at the policy, and we did incorporate some new matrix points to increase it to 80. And so tonight, what we wanted to do is introduce you to a proposed list of 6 criteria points to be considered for the scoring proposals. So we have 6 of those that we want to talk about, as well as the matrix, and then I incorporated the LIHTC review criteria on how we got to those points for discussion. And then we have the maps showing LIHTC per districts, LIHTC and housing authority developments, and as well as district median area incomes.
Do we approve housing authority license? No.
We can start with the low-income housing tax credits. These are projects that's on the KHRC 2014 listing. And what we did is we put the area median income for the district, as well as how many projects are in that district. There is one
Mr.
thing.
Brockman, I'm going to interrupt you for just
Yes.
a second and just verify, because we're getting some of this at the last moment, and Commissioner Townsend is with us by phone. Commissioner Townsend, are you in a position where you can see the television and see the chart that he's referring to that's being presented on the screen here in our room?
Yes, I have been watching everything visually. The chart has not come up on the screen yet. It's running a little behind, as all of them have, but eventually I have been seeing everything that's been put on the screen, but it's not up there yet.
Okay, fantastic. We'll do our best to get that up as quickly as possible. Thanks, Mr. Brockman. Go ahead.
As we look at that map, it's showing us that there were actually 28 LIHTC projects within all the districts. There's a couple of items that shows
time frame?
in blue.
Within what time frame were those projects? Within how many years were those projects executed?
Sir, I would have to go back and get the actual list of when they were actually developed.
So, can I?
Go ahead.
These are not pending applications?
Correct.
These are previous applications?
These are, they're completed. They are on their list.
And as
Okay,
I
well,
look at them,
I think.
there's some history up there.
Yeah, because I'll tell you, okay, so I can only speak for my district, but Silver City Apartments, which you have on there, their tax compliance period is almost up. So they're at the end. That was issued in, I think in 1980s. So I want to say middle or latter 80s, and it's a 30-year official compliance, but a 15-year tax credit compliance period. So they'd be over with. Might be late 80s it was issued. It would be helpful for the other commissioners, I think, to realize the date of these, because the nice thing about realizing the date, I swore I wasn't going to do this. I apologize in advance. But I cannot help myself on this. So I think what would be helpful for all of us, including some of the commissioners that may not work with this, is to know the date of these properties, because some of them may be in a position to begin being phased out, or these developers might be looking very soon to come in front of us to renew and get another 30-year allocation of tax credits. And we, as commissioners and this particular committee, would want to be ahead of that game, kind of know what's going on, specifically in our areas. So that would be helpful. Just, you know, this is great. I mean, so far, seriously. I mean, this took a lot of effort and time, and that map is really fantastic. But you are missing a LIHTC development in my district, I'll tell you. It's the Simmons Villas project.
No, it's there.
It's there.
But we have Simmons Villas here.
Why is it in blue? What's the difference between blue and red?
Those are scattered sites. Those blue are considered scattered site projects. These are single projects. And why we have one in 6, because north of South 37th, that address where it's a parking lot, it's gonna be duplexes,
Right.
actually falls in District 6.
It's scattered site. It's also different types of housing
Right.
that are gonna be done. So I apologize. I'll let you do
Oh,
your
no.
presentation.
And I do have the listing of developments from KHRC, and I can go back and get the actual dates for you, and that would be no problem, and I can send them to you individually.
If you could do this map, the easiest thing would be just to put a date and then tell the commissioners what the tax credit compliance period is, which I believe is 15 years, and then the final compliance period where the property can be used for anything else, which I believe is 30 years. I think if they have those 2 dates, that would be very helpful for people within their districts to kind of assess what they may want to do in the future.
So the start date of the tax credit.
Right.
And
It's, the full
ending.
tax credit compliance period is 30 years. And in
Right.
order to use that property, the ground, the dirt it sits on,
Mm-hmm.
for anything other than low-income housing, 30 years has to pass.
The Lura on that.
Right. But 15 years is when the developer can come back for more tax credits.
Mhm.
Believe it or not. They can overlap each other. So these commissioners I would think would want to know that within their districts, to kind of know where they're at with this property.
Okay. Okay, Commissioners, so also I wanted to point out, in District 1, we have the Highland Park Townhomes. Our staff went through there, and this is, like I said, the 2014 listing, but they actually went bankrupt in 2006. So that is going to be coming off, as well as, I'm sorry, that's the next slide. Show
Okay.
you. So on this next slide here, we have housing developments, housing authority developments next to LIHTC, which considers our scattered sites as well. So,
Can that be any bigger? I can't read the small print, or do we have a
yeah,
smaller?
you have a map in your packet.
Is it here?
Yes, it's in the second packet there, Ann.
Thank you, Mr. Alfie. Is it the last
Looks
page?
like this.
I just couldn't read the details. Okay, sorry about that.
So one thing I want to point out, Commissioners, in District 8, right there, let's see, get this thing to point. Right there, it says that there are 2 housing authority developments, but it's only showing 1 in that area. That's because they both have the same address and are right on top of each other. So when we did the map, we couldn't really separate them. It overrode it. So there's actually 2 right there in that area. So comparing the housing authority to the LIHTC, we have 28 LIHTCs and we have 22 housing authority properties spread out throughout the districts. So I wanted to give you this chart because you asked for it last time, comparing the LIHTC and the Housing Authority, as well as the area median income per the district.
Right, and I know people can all look at this themselves and figure it out, but what I think is very interesting is that LIHTC developments, as we heard in our presentation from LISC, was intended to, over time, increase median income. But if you look at the number, I have the largest number of housing authority developments throughout the entire county, significantly more development. If you looked at units, I bet you'd even see substantially more low-income housing people from the housing authority, yet my median income is the highest east of 635. I'm sure, again, I'll go back to what I told Brian in our earlier meeting, I'm no researcher or unable to determine why things are like that, but I can tell you, that's where I think LIHTC has failed, is that actually I would not want 6 housing authority units in my district if I could control that, but I will tell you, it has had less of a negative impact on my district's overall median income, in my opinion, because I think it's a far better run low-income housing provider than the LIHTC program is. Far better. Because, and I will say, my personal opinion is because we have local control, because we have a local governing board, the Housing Authority Board of Directors, and we have local people that live in Wyandotte County running the Housing Authority. Is it perfect? No, but it's better. And I will tell you, the Housing Authority doesn't have near the level of incentives that LIHTC does. It really is a shame because they do an incredibly good job for what they're dealing with.
Well, that's the first half of what we wanted to talk about. The second half was the matrix and how we incorporated increasing it to 80%. And we took in 80 points, I'm sorry, not 80%, apologize. For the 80 points, we have taken in all of the discussions and compiled it into a new matrix with a new local review. And one, it will take into accountability, and two, past projects, their track record. So if you want, we can move through the matrix, and you have a copy, and off to the right in your copy, it says new over here, or it says previous, you know, it's always been there, but we updated it a little bit, and then I can discuss that with you. So if we start right off at the top of the matrix here, we're looking at, we increased it by 80 points, and that's on page 2. And then it starts off at 1 with prerequisites. And previously these, and currently, the developer has to have all of these. The applicant has to show this. If they don't have all of these, then it does not get forward to be reviewed for 50 points. So what we have done is increase the 80% or 80 points, sorry. And then on H, we worked on the qualified development and management team.
Under H 2, submit a complete list of all previous and successfully developed and operated similar market rate development and tax credit development within and outside the Kansas City metro area. Would that, and if they are not able to submit, if they are brand new to LIHTC, would they simply not be able to compete for that?
No, sir.
David, where are you? I'm sorry. Tell me where.
Page 3.
Page
so
3.
under
Page
letter
3 on
H,
what? On-
H2.
The local review.
Okay, page 3, H2, you said?
Yeah, page 3, yeah, H2.
And your
So
question again, I'm sorry.
The question was, if the requirement is to submit a complete list of all previous and successfully developed and operated similar market rate development and tax credit development, would this ace them out of competing for a LIHTC recommendation? In other words, they have no previous experience, they're brand new to a LIHTC project, and they have nothing to submit.
If we turn to page 12,
Okay?
and we go to E, it describes the strength of the applicant.
What page
And
again?
I think, Commissioner, maybe to answer the question, it's more to ensure that if they did have existing
You've got-
projects, that they
you can
are
review it.
well-kept, correct. I
So,
think it's
this
meant
is-
to weed out those that have not
So
done a
you-
project before.
You would gain points if, upon review of that, what they submit, of their previous development, you saw that they were few enforcement violations, and the few they did, they handled well, and they saw improvements, that would improve their score.
Yes, sir. On the strength of the applicant, you can get up to 2 points. If they've had extensive development experience on similar proposals, they would receive 2 points.
Okay.
If they've only had 1 or 2, then they would only receive 1. One of the important factors is we've really increased the qualifications for the development and management team, where they didn't have to submit any of this before. But now, we would like them to submit a formal property and tenant management plan that we can review. And we can send that in electronically when we do our RFA for your review prior to standing committee, if you have questions. Some of the things that are in that, at a minimum, would include enforcement and control measures, future maintenance reserve plan, which you will get points for that as well within the plan for the review.
Let me ask you, so let's say that on page 3, H2, again, that you had 2A, a list of all enforcement violations against each property and how the violations were corrected. Suppose that, how would you quantify that would allow, if you were to disallow an application or not let it move forward because the report came back that they were not good caretakers, right? Would that be enough to veto an application, or just they don't earn the points for that?
They don't earn points.
They don't
They
earn
don't
the
earn
points.
points.
Okay. And if we quantify that, do we have to quantify that? And if we don't quantify that with some kind of objective measure, then do we open ourselves again to a lawsuit? How could it be objectively evaluated?
Commissioner McGee.
So I'd make a comment on that. I mean, it is what it is. I guess that some of the fault or some of the responsibility would have to lie on the residents of Wyandotte County. And for example, what they could report is a list of violations that code enforcement has issued. That would be a legitimate way to say you have a track record. We use that all the time, just so you know, on the commission. We want to look at things. Have they ever failed to pay their taxes? That's usually not an issue, but if they had been late or not paid, that would be another potential violation. Then just in general, formal community complaints to our 311 service or whatever, there would have to be some, I agree, some formalization. It can't just be that the community has been talking about it, but nobody's ever been calling anything in. Police reports should also be considered in that. How many times have the police been called to that particular complex? And for what reasons, what's going on there? I think all that's legitimate. It just is what it is. I don't know how a government could be sued for reporting, you know, the facts like that.
Right, and I'm not suggesting that collecting the information is one thing. Evaluating what that means in comparison to other applicants who are seeking the same funds is another matter, I assume. But I don't know. I'm just asking a legal question.
I believe one of my attorneys has worked on that, and he's heading to the microphone.
If the question is whether we don't have, very strict objective criteria, if that would give rise to a lawsuit or give, I guess more ammunition, if you will, for a lawsuit, To some extent, yes, it can. I mean, but still, the threshold test is whether our practice and policies have the effect of prohibiting these type of developments in any, essentially discrimination. So
So
by
you- so in
being
other words-
objective, you can show why you're doing it and why it's not for discriminatory intent. If you don't have those, then you have to still show why it's not for discriminatory
I see.
intent.
So the legal test would be, can you, if someone tried to make a case, they would have to prove that the unified government was using this to discriminate against this particular proposal.
Correct.
Right, okay.
And really, this, for me, just follows up my concern of last month, which was that somebody get blanket enhancement of their application for having been a previous developer, if in fact that development was poorly managed, poorly operated, and ended up creating more problems than it solved in the neighborhood. So I'm glad to see that we've come up with a system, because I don't want someone to get blanket approval if they've done it poorly in the past.
So, that's an important point, and I appreciate the input on that.
Mr. Alvey, you asked what I think was a good question. I asked it several years ago about would they not be considered if they had not done one. My experience, though a little more than the committees, still fairly limited, is that the state of Kansas is not going to issue LIHTC credits to somebody that's never done a deal. They have to have some sort of housing development experience to draw on. So I know you asked that, and as someone that's gone through the application process at the state level, not just at the local level, I just wanted you to know that.
Thank you.
We had to partner with a seasoned developer to make that happen. I love this, it's great. It's just a grammatical change, I guess, or a wording change. You write, submit a complete list of all previous and successfully developed. I don't really think that's, the "and successfully" is necessary. They just need to list all previous developments. And then below, it addresses what the issues have been with those developments. Otherwise, I think staff is gonna be reviewing, because they're gonna try to highlight their successes and minimize, and it'll get confusing. So they just need to list their previous developments and list the problems. I don't really need a marketing story around how great they did in a particular area. I don't think you really want that either. Yeah.
Okay, then if we jump to housing and resident tenant needs, 4A on page 7, at the bottom. I wanted to bring this up. Recently, I was talking with the KHRC, and now that instead of 4,000 as the federal requirement for rehab, the minimum for Kansas is 10,000. So I wanted to bring that to your attention, because we have not discussed that, and see if you would agree for that change.
I'm not sure what it means.
It's basically, if you do rehab, there's a minimum requirement previously, you have to have $4,000 put in per unit to be qualified. The state of Kansas has a minimum requirement of 10,000, so I think we should mirror that.
Yes.
Wow.
But,
I think that's fantastic.
okay. Okay, then if we go to the next page, 8, this is where we're incorporating what I heard in the discussions is land bank properties. I want to bring this in and discuss it with you. Chris Lauder's doing an excellent job in land bank and working with the committee to get rid of properties and new ideas on the property. So we wanted to incorporate LIHTC as well. And I know Commissioner McCarron has mentioned a little bit on this. So throughout, we're trying to incorporate, if you use LIHTC or LIHTC and land bank, you would use or get additional points. So if the acquisition of land bank here, in this case, with an improvement for rehab, you would receive an extra 3 points on this, just for using a land bank property. And then if we go down to page 8 at the bottom, minimal impact to existing rental market, E, it's a current policy, but we also increased the points a little bit.
Could you, so under bullet point 1 under E, the development is located in either the Turner or Morris neighborhoods of Area 4. Does that include the rental units in Highland Crest? Or is it only apartments and duplexes?
It's specifically any rental units.
Any rental unit?
Mhm.
Because
And-
of those 3,000 homes in that development, I believe at least a third, if not 2/3, are rental. So
Well, we're not, and what I mean by not, the rental, I mean like a housing project, rental housing project.
right.
Okay.
But the way it's written, it says if the existing rental market, which I would assume would include even single-family detached, is less impacted by the proposed development. But rental units, does that refer again to just housing developments? Or does it include existing neighborhoods that were originally family-owned?
You see, I didn't interpret it that way at all. I interpreted across the board when you're doing this LIHTC deal, if you're, I'm assuming you're renting anywhere in Turner, that a LIHTC development deal would take place, would receive more points simply because there, as you've seen on our map, there's nothing there now in the way of formalized affordable housing.
But it doesn't say, it doesn't specify affordable LIHTC, it just says rental units. And I think that's just a general, term, right?
Yes.
So that does include even single-family detached that is under rental.
Well, when we've always looked at it, when we've gone through the review, we have looked at it like Commissioner Murguia has. These are developments that are in the area, say X over here. If we bring in this development, will it draw people from that development over to this development? We don't want that.
Okay. So you're really talking about low-income rental units. So
Can you give
I would
us
just
an
say that,
example?
specify that,
That's the intent, we should.
specify that.
Yes, I agree.
Okay, give me an make something up with this, what you've written here. Make up a scenario for me, because I need to make sure we are all on the same page with that.
Okay. If there's a rental unit in Turner.
Single family or multifamily, or does it matter? Multifamily.
Okay, so multifamily.
If it's multifamily and a LIHTC project comes in 5 blocks away, what's the impact on the rental units on the existing rental development? Will it draw them away? So, and that's how we look at it.
But what if, okay, so I'm still with you, I think it's good, so what if, I can only use an example from my district. So there's an apartment complex not for long to be rented at the rate it's rented at. It's called University Villas in Rosedale. We'll pretend it's in Turner. And their rental rates are already at the LIHTC rate. And the developer just wants to improve the rental property. So they want to come in and buy it for the LIHTC credits so they can use the development dollars to improve the units, $10,000 a unit. If there's 100 units, you can just do the math. So it's a $100,000 improvement to this facility. It's already renting, that's the rate they're already renting at. And the people that live there are eligible. Do they get the extra points or no? And the same with Highland Crest, like Mr. Alvey said, let's say he goes in and he decides he's gonna buy 50 houses in Highland Crest because it's had such significant issues. whether they're rental or whether they're single family that he's acquired that were not rental prior, can he make them a scattered site LIHTC deal and get the extra points for that?
Yes.
Okay, then I'm good with that.
So I would just ask that the language state more clearly what is and what is not understood as a rental unit there.
Okay.
Don't you just really mean affordable housing unit instead of specifically rental?
Well, if we go, let me see, E, if we go to page 10, N at the bottom, it says minimal adverse impact upon public assisted housing. And then it continues off on page 11, which we added the third bullet.
Where do you see that at, George?
Page 10, on
So is
N, and then moves over to page 11.
that a redundancy then? Are you simply stating in a different way what is implied or included in, under E?
Well, you know, when we review,
Yeah.
we look at it under E, is it gonna have an impact on
Right.
that rental unit? If it's gonna take it away.
Okay.
Then we look at specifically housing authority properties. And these housing authority properties, 2 points are given or 1 point. And now we've added, because of the concern about a lot of, you know, we don't want.
I see, but yeah, that's not a redundancy, because you could have a project in District 6 that is within 3 miles of, which would be within 3 miles of Silver City Apartments, and therefore it would not qualify.
Now, we
Or would
can,
would not get those points.
right.
So,
Now, that 3 miles, commissioners, is, you know, if you look above that bullet, it says near existing 1 to 2 miles. So, I mean, we can change that miles if you want 2.5, if you want 3 or 3.5. I mean, what would be considered reasonable?
I'm not really worried about the distance in this case scenario as much as I'm worried about why do we care if we beat out the housing authority? Why would we care if we provide better housing stock for our low-income people than the housing authority does? Why are we concerned about that? I'm not trying to put you on, you did a great job on this. It
what
just-
I'm- Could this be, because we had some concerns that we'd articulated about the potential to cluster,
Right.
to concentrate.
Sure.
And is this intended
Yes.
to kind of mitigate concentrating or clustering?
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
But your point is very well taken. If you can effect an improvement in the housing stock that's already there,
So I guess this is the rule I care about. So that helped me, Brian, immensely. So this is the rule I would care about. If there is 2 low-income apartment complexes, one is a LIHTC and one is the housing authority, and they're within a mile of each other already, they're existing property, and somebody wants to come in and do a LIHTC deal to redevelop or improve, rehab that one LIHTC unit, you know, that LIHTC facility, then will they lose those points? Because in that case, I don't think they should lose those points. I think they should gain them. You're not adding. The only time I think you should lose those points is if you're building an additional low-income facility.
Right.
But if it's already low-income and you're just rehabbing it, do you see what I'm saying,
Yes.
George? Or Charles, yeah, it would just be better if, they should earn those points if they're coming in and rehabilitating.
Okay.
But I think your concept, you're on the right track, that's very good. I would just say, I want them to earn points if they're improving existing. I don't want clustering of new.
Right.
That's just my opinion, unless someone disagrees. Okay.
I guess the other thing I'd comment along with that is under E, that it would seem to me that, let's suppose there would be over the next 10 to 15 years, more affordable housing development in Turner or Morris or Piper, such that there would then be a balance between commission districts. Would this be a permanent statement, or, in other words, if this is trying to equalize some way the concentration of low-income housing, at some point that may not be necessary?
Yes, sir. In the memo in your packet, it speaks about coming back, I think it was biannually, and reviewing it for any changes that may occur. So it's, right now, it'd be, temporary if you wanted to change it.
So, Mr. Alvey, I just want to comment about something you said. One of the things that I'm looking at and having regular conversation with the Housing Authority about is that the Housing Authority property here in Wyandotte County is becoming very old. Most of it is east of 635, bulk of it in my district. Majority of it built in the 60s and early 70s. That's, 50-plus years old now. And so one of the things Tom Scott is doing who's the executive director over there, is looking at maybe being able to sell some of that property for redevelopment opportunities. And this is just me speaking, not him, but I'd like to see our housing authority get creative with scattered site LIHTC developments in partnership with our housing authority, so they could actually reap some benefit of some revenue from the development fees off of a LIHTC development. They could make some money, sell off some old property, increase the quality of living for our low-income people in Wyandotte County, and more evenly distribute the low income throughout the entire county, so it has very little impact in one particular area. Whether that happens or not is another story, but I'm trying to work in that direction with him.
Mr. Levin, did you have something?
Yeah, I was just going to add a little maybe historical perspective to that E. That I happen to have assisted with the original policy and the point criteria. And I think the intention at the time, and this was probably was developed about 10 years ago, was to give a little balance to the, I'll say in this instance, the Piper, Turner areas of the community. If you go prior to E, you see some points awarded for if it's in a CDBG eligible census tract or a low income census tract, and those areas did not necessarily meet those criteria. And I think when we were looking at rental units, we were looking more at apartment complexes at the time, and I think the probably since then the magnitude that you referred to on the single-family development you've seen more of a conversion to rental units. That wasn't a consideration at the time. And I think to your last point, if you review the policy over time, you might say, does this specific additional points, is it relevant a year from now as it was previously?
Right.
Well, I would anticipate that if, let's say, the housing authority were to get involved in doing a scattered site development in Highland Crest, it would be an improvement, because they would have some controls and some oversight.
That's right.
Thank you, Lou. That puts us to 4G. What we did is we, once again, want to promote new construction, scattered site, mixed use, and alternative use development, as well as family unit complexes. So we came up with the 0 to 35 points to get to that 80. So if the proposal, and I'm looking under G, if the proposal is for a scattered site single-family unit, it will receive 15 points. If it's an infill for structure, it'll receive points. If it's land bank, once again, it will receive points. And here's something that I wanted to discuss. It says all proposals must have a minimum 25% market rate units. We tried to keep that in all of the developments now. I mean, that was my takeaway from the meetings from ED&F over the past several months. Now, there is no minimum requirement for or for senior assisted living. So that's one that will not have 25% unless, you know, we want to change that.
No, well, again, Charles, I just think that's fabulous. I think that's absolutely brilliant to make, to require that, because some people may not know, the high-tech developers love to come in front of us and say, it's 60-40% split, 40% of the people have to be low income. They don't have to be low income. It's a recommendation. What Charles is doing by putting this in writing is it's a requirement. It's no longer a recommendation. And if you look at, like we talked about before, a lot of our neighborhoods that are currently renting apartments or renting, I'll just tell you on behalf of my district, a lot of the apartment rates and the rental rates for single-family housing is already at the low-income housing rental rate. So what they're just missing is they don't have the incentive, the LIHTC incentive on that property, but it's already at the right rate. And by doing this LIHTC development, they can provide, like I said, higher quality living for the same amount of money. But a lot of times, it's easiest to just go recruit very low-income people and move them in because there's a large number. It's harder to get people of means to mix with that population. And so by making it a requirement to get more points, it does make it harder, but it also increases the potential for your application to go through.
And so, once again, the promotes new construction of scattered sites is new. The promotes alternative use development is a previous policy, but we added the 25% market rate, and we've included you add 33% market rate, you'd get an extra points. So that just is one more thing for this incentive to increase for more points. And then we added under the mixed use, we added a transportation corridor that we discussed. If it's in a transportation corridor and it's a mixed use, then you would receive additional points too.
You know, the only thing I would, and this doesn't really have to do anything with the policy change, but the one thing I would like to see, George, you link this with, is an economic development incentive package. Because you can have these great criteria, but unless there's money involved in it, there's not much incentive to meet the compliance, especially since there's so much criteria. It wouldn't, if somebody opted to not have 33% of the units at fair market rate, they could opt out and still their application could pass.
Exactly.
So what we want to try to do is get people to comply with, this is sort of the details of the housing vision.
Yes.
This is a great example of what we could, work from. That's why I'm saying if you link it with some sort of economic development incentive in addition to LIHTC, that would be fantastic.
Let's see. And then on page 10, M, we've added the 25% market rate there as well. That was never there. And then we discussed the minimal impact upon public assisted housing. And then this is back to the discussion, and I'm looking at 5B. On 5B, it was originally because they had 4,000. The current policy we have is you can earn additional points if it was over 10,000. So if we bumped it from 4 to 10, let's bump it from 10 to 15. So if they are above 15, then they would receive additional points.
Where's that at?
Well,
5 what? B?
Page
Page
11,
11.
5B. Because previously, if it was above 10,000, you would get extra points. Since we bumped it to 10, I raised it by 5 and said, okay, if you go over 15, then you get additional this time. And that's something that, if you're in agreement, we'll hold.
I just have a general question, and I may not be understanding this correctly. So 5B, additional rehabilitation expense, if average rehabilitation expense exceeds 15,000 per unit, and then compare that with, again, I guess that's 4G on page 9. Is the way that the matrix written offering more points for new construction as opposed to rehabilitation? So let's talk about, again, a place like Highland Crest. Does the matrix encourage much more new construction?
Well,
Or,
excuse me, Commissioner. On
Yeah.
F right above it, new construction, you get 3 points.
okay,
If it's rehabilitation previously to that, let me see.
maybe I'm not understanding under G.
You
it
get
says
6
0 to
points if
35
it's
points.
rehabilitation, and 3 points if it's new construction.
Where's the rehabilitation section?
It's on page 7 for A.
Uh-huh.
So
And how
you-
many's for new?
3, but then we've increased the points to 0 to 35 to balance it out. Did that answer your question, sir?
You know what, I think I'm misreading how this works, because when I see, under G again, promotes new construction of scatter site, single-family development, 0 to 35 points. Is that 0 to 35 out of 80 potential points?
No, in this, if
Yeah.
I'm understanding, G, that category, you can earn up to 35 points
Right? Okay,
of the 80.
of the 80, that's right.
Correct. Now, if you did that, promote scattered site family development, or let's take the example, if you're doing, promotes alternative use development, you can get up to 35 points of the 80, but then if you turn around and you use mixed-use development, you would get an additional up to 15 points.
Okay.
But Mr. Alvey, to answer your question, would you like to see rehab projects addressed in a similar fashion as all of these broad, different categories of new construction so that it's same spectrum of points available?
Well, I'm just asking the question. I mean, that's not
Yeah.
really, honestly, as a BP board member, I think that's really, I'm just asking the question. I think it's really something the commission, I'm just trying to clarify for myself whether the way this is written, encourages single-family new construction more than it would single-family rehab. Because I do think there's a great need for single-family rehab, and especially I think in a place like Highland Crest.
And I completely agree with Mr. Alvey. For clarity, it would just be easier, because it does appear that we're, by the way this was written, it's encouraging new construction versus rehabilitation. And I don't think we're really encouraging one over the other. We're trying to get the best, we're trying to determine the best use of property, whether it be vacant land or rehabilitation for whatever area it's in. So I don't think one should supersede the other, just it's the criteria that's so important. Just like you said, Charles, about if you're gonna rehabilitate, you might need more money per unit than if you're gonna do new construction, because sometimes when you're rehabilitating, you don't know what you're gonna run into, especially older housing stock. So I will say that I have an opinion on that, and that it would be nice to see it laid out like new construction
Okay. We'll do that.
with a point system that moves them in the right direction.
That'll be done.
And I'm not even sure, if I'm a developer who's looking to do an LIHTC, if I look at the incentives or point system, am I going to choose to do single-family because I get more points than if I go into another existing neighborhood and rehab? Probably that decision is never, you're either going to rehab, you're either a rehabber or you're starting new. And that's my assumption, I bet, but I don't
That's
know.
right.
Okay, and then, let me see, we're on, we talked about N, and then, so that would give us to the end of the page, at the end, page 14, number 7. Under ownership,
We'll make that 100 points.
it was discussed in ED&F that it would be nice to have local ownership. Because with local ownership, there's also more control, you know, of what the managing and so on can take place. So we thought that we could put in 5 points if they're local.
How many points can we give them that they build at 75th and Mission? Probably not many.
No, I do think that's great. And just again, for clarity, it's, you know, for people watching and listening, it's just extra points. It doesn't mean that somebody in another city, state, county can't develop LIHTC in Wyandotte County. It just means that they're not gonna get as many points as if someone in Wyandotte County was to develop it.
So, just to sum it up, I'm gonna go through this matrix and the local review. Should we extend the moratorium for another month, 2 months? We have not received any applications yet. And typically, they all come out once at the end of the year, it seems like. But there is a 45-day period prior to January that we cannot receive any of those applications.
I don't, well, we have, if Commissioner Townsend is on, then we have a quorum.
Yes, we still have a quorum.
We still have a quorum.
Yes, Commissioner McKiernan had to leave early, so I'm gonna finish the meeting for him. Commissioner Townsend, are you still on the line?
Yes, I am.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner McKiernan had to leave, so please don't hang up on us. We need you for a quorum, okay?
Oh, no, I'm here to the end.
Okay.
I make a motion to extend the moratorium.
For how much longer?
How much time I don't know.
I would say 60 days.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. Does anybody have any more comments or questions? Commissioner Townsend, simply because you're on the phone, do you have any comments or questions?
No, I've been listening to the discussion. I do not have the matrix. I was waiting for that to appear, but I was encouraged that the points in the packet that I did have seemed to address all of the issues that were raised during our last meeting. So that's the focus, and I'll just look later at the details. If I have any other follow-up questions, I'll just follow them up with Mr. Brockman. And I thank him for supplying me with the properties that were identified as LIHTC in District 1. He followed up with that after our last meeting in my request for that information.
Commissioner Townsend, this is Charles Brockman. I'll deliver a packet upstairs for you tomorrow that the other commissioners received today.
Is it available online tonight?
I can scan it and send it to you if you want.
Well, you don't have to do that. I was just asking, was it already online? If not, I can get it tomorrow. Thank you.
Okay.
So it looks like we don't have any more questions, and we have a motion and a second. Roll call?
Roll call. Alvey.
Aye.
Walters.
Aye.
Rodriguez.
Aye.
Townsend.
Aye.
McKiernan.
Thank you all very much, and with that, we're adjourned.
Wonderful.